Okay, welcome to episode 2 of the Snags and Old Silky podcast. I'm Snags.
And I'm Old Silky.
There you have it. So, let's see. You wanted to plug that amazing masterpiece of a first pilot podcast episode we did.
You know, until we have a handful of shows, it's easy to just say, "Hey, you missed a hell of an episode last week." We talked about the mighty Ronnie James Dio.
There you go.
And now we're fast forwarding to our amazing second episode with LP3, Lester Pace, and his wife Michelle Pace, who are very, very amazing authors in their own right. And this week's episode is going to be on indie publishing and all that entails. And I can just kind of have them start, or we can kind of spotlight some of their books.
Yeah, I think it could be a balance between just indie publishing and talking about their specific work. So I'll let you take the lead since you're more familiar with their work.
All right. Les or Michelle, do you guys want to kind of just introduce and go through your story? I kind of outlined what I thought you got, just to help you come up with where to start. I kind of threw some stuff at Michelle earlier, just possible ideas. But you guys, it's open for discussion now. You guys can jump in.
Okay, yeah. So about 11 years ago or so, I was dragged kicking and screaming into the indie world by a former co-author of mine. We've been writing stories for years together, and she was unemployed and bored and decided to, submit something that we'd written in the past to, a small, independent trade publisher. And they were interested, which shocked me more than I can imagine. And
Right.
She was like, well, crap, now we have to rewrite it so it's good. And so that's kind of where we started. And then right before we were going to publish, we'd signed contracts. We'd been through 2 rounds or so of editing. They said,
Wow.
we're disassembling. If you want the rights back, you can have them back. And, they were basically, kind of disbanding as an organization. And we're like, yeah, we want our rights back. So we went ahead at that point, because I've made a lot of friends in the indie world, and said, we've got these contacts now that make covers, that do formatting, that do editing. Let's go ahead and just publish it. I mean, we've come this far. We were ready to go. And so
that was Fury and Rage.
That was Fury. Yeah, Fury first. There was something in between. And again, that was not something I ever really intended to do. I certainly didn't think it was ready. I'm certainly glad that we made other passes at it, because it was horrifying for me to imagine it being out in the world in the state it was in at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, that is how we got started. Of course, Les had been writing stories long before, this happened. And I think once he saw, the process that I was going through, he was like, okay, this is something that obviously can be done. And it was kind of in the heyday of the, when indie was really taking off, and so people were really starting to, get some fame and make some money and make hit lists and things like that. It's basically, If you think about reflecting back on, remember when indie movies were all the rage in the 90s, and
Allison Anders and
Janine Garofalo, that movie she was in.
Sure, yeah, all of the Sundance Film Festival stuff. And I mean, if you think back to
Gas
that
Food
era,
Lodging,
it was sort of that kind of renaissance, I would describe it, for writing. And with that comes an ugly side, as you can imagine. And I'll just go ahead and say that right now. You get all these people who are doing new things, and it can be super cool, and great things can come out of it. But at the same time, you also then are looking for quality content like it's a golden needle in a haystack of needles.
Right.
A fly floating on a giant ocean shite.
So,
right.
It's like anything else. Wonderful things can come from it. People who had outside the box ideas, and I hate to say that cliche, but it's a good one. We're able to get work out there, but at the same time, there was just anyone who thought they could sit down and squirt out 80,000 words was doing so and putting it out there like it was a product. You know what I mean?
Right. So, I remember telling you about somebody's book was like overhearing a story on a bus, and you just want them to stop so you can zone out.
I remember that very well. That was like one of my favorite things because it's so true. You're just like the things that you subject yourself to.
Yeah. Well, the point is, just because you can put words together doesn't necessarily mean yeah.
No.
And I will take that one step farther, because I was a geek before it was cool and read books that we bought at auction in boxes because we lived in the middle of BFE.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember getting into fights with English teachers because they made me read The Old Man and the Sea. And I'm like, you've literally shown the preface to the Fishing Channel. It's that damn boring. We're just we're reading about the Fishing Channel. And she's like, that's not true. And I'm like, it's more boring than anything I've ever read. It was one of 3 books that before indie publishing, I could not finish. I literally made myself finish it.
And that's a short book.
And it was like eating liver that had spoiled. I was just like, this is so stupid. I can't believe this is like, quote unquote, a classic. And this lady was giving me crap about Stephen King, calling him a hack writer. I think
God.
Eyes of the Dragon because he didn't like horror books.
And see, with that point, you look at English teachers and even people that listen to classic rock. At some point, you have to be able to admit that Eric Clapton no longer really contributes, and he stopped around the 1971 with the Derek and the Dominoes album. That was really the end, and then it was all beer commercials.
Well, Chris had his own coattails.
Yes, and so what I was getting with the literary is your English teacher will tell you, oh, it's Mark Twain. You're supposed to like this. And while Tom Sawyer was amazing, Huck Finn was really like, it never got off the ground, and then it just starts burying itself. And then at the end, you find out that the kid's dad had died all the way back, and they didn't need to go run off and do it, So it was all just a big waste of time. And then in the real world, Samuel Clemens was trying to just be done with that story, and I'm told he was, submitting to the newspaper each month or each week or whatever, and everybody was clamoring for an ending, and they wanted to know more, and he just wrapped it up because he was tired of writing it.
Yeah, but they also gave him money, and he famously said, I'll write on a piece of chalkboard for you to read as long as you give me $1 to go buy a beer afterwards. I mean, it's paraphrasing, but he was like, I don't care as long as you're paying me.
Right.
Since the indie world came out, I mean, I still read a lot, but I turn more to audiobooks and stuff, but that 3 or 4 books I wasn't able to finish in my lifetime. One of those, by the way, is the Bible. Not throwing any shade. They just have a really bad editor. But when you go through now, my unread pile looks like a mountain that Smog would be sitting on, because I'd get into the first part of it and be like, y'all suck. Like, why are you doing this to people? This could be like Geneva Convention torture. Like, what you're stringing together at no time makes any sense. Your characters never learn anything, and we're left stupider having experienced this verbal diarrhea that came out of your brain.
Well, and in writing, or just kind of, this will tie into like some movies you see, when the main character has a younger brother that's touched by God, usually expect that younger brother to get killed, so that provides the motivation for the main character. So it's a cliche thing.
Oh God, the
you just can't get away from. Yeah.
I've told Michelle on multiple occasions I'm listening to this genre called lit RPG, which is based off of like all the games that people play. They write books with a lot of stats in them. But the most common thing I have is 12 pages of there's no possible way you can do this. This is an unkillable beast. This is an impossible task. You're all going to die. Ah! And then they solve the problem 5 seconds later because somebody had a Zagnut bar that they could throw at the beast, and it was like peanut intolerant. You know, it's just like you just wasted your credit with me as a reader because I don't believe that you're a good writer now because you had to manufacture this.
Right. Well, then, any vampire story, this guy's immortal and he dies in 2 hours.
Right. I will say in the lit RPG genre, there are a couple of big names, and one of them is Alaron Kong, who's a doctor. If you've never read a book like that, it literally is some of the most disturbing stuff I have ever read.
You suggested book 1 of his.
Yes.
And I read it, but it just didn't grab me. I finished it, but I couldn't sign on for the second book.
It's like with my first book in the Lost One series, it was really slow to start. If that second book ever came out, I literally have to get a job so I've gone to college now so that I can get a better job so that I can make more money, so that I can afford to publish my second book in that series. And I joke about that, but I gave away 2,000 copies of that when I published it.
Right.
And I was wondering why I wasn't making any money, and I went and found that this piddly little book, they pirated it on one site more than 10,000 times.
Oh my
damn.
God.
Yeah, there's a lot of pirating that goes on.
Yeah. Snags, this book, The Lost One, it as I read it, I was reminded of bits of the Harry Potter series, more leaning towards the Tolkien Lord of the Rings style, but it bizarrely, in a nod to LP3 here, it managed to have its own originality, and in a lot of your fantasy series, they tend to go all weird, and you gotta like look up what the hell they're talking. Like they've created it. It's so difficult to follow that. And Snags follows sci-fi a lot, so he can kind of understand what I'm getting at with that.
I think
Well, let me just
fantasy is world building. Like you can go really sideways into your world building and then lose your story and your characters.
Yeah, because you're getting so technical.
Yeah, exactly. Or it's so foreign that people are just trying to keep straight the crazy world you've built. And so I think you can go too far into the story and then not world build enough, or you can world build so much that people are just like, so they've forgotten like the thread of the plot.
It's the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek, where Star Wars you just kind of jump right in and it's fine. Star Trek you kind of have to pay a little more attention.
Right.
How I always felt.
So this book is so good.
Star Lego set and Star Trek, they have actual blueprints for the goddamn ships. Like you can go home and build them.
But it's but I think again, it's nice that there are different flavors for sure out there. I mean, I think that, it is definitely a love-hate relationship because I've seen a lot of bad sci-fi and fantasy in my time and read a lot of like abandoned. I think I've abandoned more of those kind of books because I'm like, I can't keep your characters straight because their names are also wackadoo and like half of them sound the same and like I don't even know who's doing what anymore. You know what I mean? Like
right.
You can get really in the weeds with those kind of books.
Have you marketed this book by saying over 10,000 copies stolen?
It's funny because I have.
So it would be The Lost One times 10,000.
Well, if they would have just bought the book, which was $3.
Cheapskates.
If they would have just bought the book and half of them didn't return it since Amazon basically was letting people return it for like 2 weeks.
Oh yeah. You have a 7-day return on books and on Amazon like you do everything else, and that's like the hugest problem with publishing.
I didn't know that. That sucks.
But if they would have bought it, even half of them, I would have had more than enough money to pay the. And keep in mind, a lot of these people that I got stuff for, we bought in bulk because we were doing multiple books. So even at a discount, I had the sequel to The Lost One done. I even think that Silky read the almost complete version of it. And
I liked it.
I literally got to almost publish time, and I went, you know what? No. And I just put it in the drawer. And people were like, the 3 people who wanted to read it, Silky, my dad, and somebody else who's like an Uber fan, they were like, why not? And I'm like, I literally can't afford to do this right now because the amount of money that you have to put out, it's not just the hours you spend writing it and the hours you spend editing it and then the hours you spend, getting it beta read and then having it professionally edited. And then you have to go back through what they did just in case they screwed it up. And then you have to get it formatted. Now, I learned how to format ebooks into all the different types, but I still use somebody because they have a little bit more style in what they're doing. There's an artist. Yeah. And doing all that stuff. But then once you get it to the market, you have it at the gate, you're ready to open the gate and let it out into the world. You have to go out and do PR. You have to go out and, do like meet and greets, and you have to go to book signings and stuff like that. That is a lot of money.
And, doing things like blog hops and, that all of that involves PR people and there's a small cost to it. And it's a very expensive hobby. And
these book tours, you're not paid to be, you're paying for a booth or a table.
100%. It's like being in a flea market.
And you're paying for the hotel.
It's like a farmer's market for books.
It's literally like a garage band. It's like if you're in a garage band and you get somebody's van and you all pool your gas money and you're eating like stale Cheetos that somebody found in a dumpster at one of the gas stations. Yeah. And then you're trying to sell your CDs after the show.
This is reminding me of Henry Rollins' book, Get in the Van, about touring with Black Flag.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
It's very much like that, but it's like you're booking yourself.
Yeah.
You're finding a venue that'll take you, and then you're trying to make sure that you get enough interest before you show up that you sell your books. I'll tell you, I can sell ice to an Eskimo.
Yeah.
And I'd be at these places. I'd find 12 or 13 new readers and be like, this was a successful weekend because they'll tell their friends.
Yeah, and Les was great because we went to many, he'd be like the odd man out at all of these, like probably the only male author a lot of the time. So, he would get people that had been dragged along to these like kind of romance style, signings. And they're like, oh, somebody that writes something else. And so, like, they'd be so excited that he was in a different genre that he would usually sell out, to be honest, because people it was so refreshing. Because the market's very saturated by a lot of, I'm using the air quotes you can't see, romance, but really it's more like erotica than romance, essentially.
Bad sex scenes. Like irresponsibly poorly written sex scenes where you wonder if they've ever had sex or they're just reading about it secondhand through a friend. It's like, honey, if you think that this is a good sex scene.
No, if you think that bodies move in that particular, like, apparently the laws of physics don't apply.
People don't bend like He-Man action figures. You can't do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Snags, one of the short stories that Michelle did, she did with this other girl. The book was called Invictus, and it's very, very dark, like mutilating kind of eroticism. There's probably a better term for it that Michelle will know. But
BDSM, hardcore BDSM.
Oh no! It's more. It was categorized as horror.
Uh-huh.
Horror erotica.
So I would say if I guess if you think the Human Centipede is erotic, that's because it was definitely more of a horror book, but there was some sexual mutilation.
Have you guys seen Glenn Danzig's brilliant film Verotica? I'm using brilliant in quotes. Have you seen it?
I have not.
Oh, okay. But
I will now.
If Ed Wood who made Plan 9 from Outer Space, made a horror erotica movie, that would be it. It's hilariously bad, but I'm assuming that's kind of the genre you're talking about. Just very erotic horror.
What's it called again?
Verotica, like Veronica, but Verotica.
Okay, I am absolutely.
Oh, you have to, yeah.
On that one right now.
Yeah, it's funny, unintentionally.
Yeah, those are the best. When they don't know they're funny.
So just to like, what these two authors have done, they've Michelle did 3 with this Tammy author. Then there's short stories, one with Andrea, one with Yolanda, and she did 4 by herself. That would be Blackjack, Dearly Departed, Nights on the Round Table, which I found it extremely humorous, because that's just blatant XXX shenanigans. And then there's a really good one that she did called Runaway, which was just really dark, vividly grungy, just dirt on the floors, and I believe that's the one where the main character ends up taking a ship away out of England. Do you recall that?
I'm sitting here with an eyebrow cocked, not sure what you're talking about.
It was called that's funny. It's called Runaway. It's
okay. No, I started writing that book. I never finished it.
See, I got the.
But I don't. But nobody went on a boat, so I'm like wondering if you've written it with somebody else.
It's just what I remember.
He was drinking heavily when he read it, so
his own ending.
Yeah.
It was one of those, like pick your own.
That was the hallucination after the 3rd bottle of rum. When he was.
Sometimes when the authors won't finish writing their books,
This is what happens. Your reader makes up the ending. That's all.
And then, so she did 4 novels with her husband, with LP3, a really awesome group of books. The first one was Goodwood, then Mollywood, then Heartwood, that made up the trilogy. And then there's Wood You. Yep. Really, really good books, because what we were getting at with these book tours is a lot of romance, and just the cliche romance that is the most popular, I'm told, the most popular genre for today's readers. A very loyal fan base, but a lot of it, as you read and look into it, it's just the same story over and over. And
right.
What I found in just reading Michelle's and Les's stuff is it's more like true fiction is what I called it, because it was, a totally made up story, but it just had heart, and it had realism, and it wasn't just some chick flick in book form. There was some danger. There was some elements of angst, and the characters were like, screw this. They were the characters that you would hang out with. That you would actually take the time to know, versus the pretty people, if you will.
Can I ask you?
I think it's important if you guys think about every major story. I mean, there are love elements, like relationship elements, in so many.
Oh yeah.
Great, series, stories. I want to write things that I would want to watch or want to see, and I think that's what it boils down to. Is yes, I love that there's a relationship driving the story, but there needs to be more of a plot. People have to have the side characters have to have their own lives going on. I like ensemble pieces. I don't just like it to be about these 2 characters and everybody else is there like a 2-dimensional side character that goes, oh yeah, to everything that the main character is saying. Like, I can't stand that. So,
there's pacing, not to pun on your last name, but there's a pacing in your books that is not so much in some of the other books I've read, where you obviously know that these 2 characters are going to meet up, and then you might have a book where character A doesn't meet character B until the middle of book 2, and you're like, for fuck's sake,
right?
Come on, you know.
Yeah, I was told once that if you're writing romance, that the characters have to meet by chapter 3. I was actually told that by an editor.
But
if they don't meet by then, it's not a romance.
Yeah. Why are we doing this?
And I hate to say this, but when I was in high school, I didn't date, so I read a lot of books. And reading through the entire library at my high school, besides the encyclopedias, I read Sweet Valley High. And I'm just going to say the Sweet Valley High literature, which I'm going to use that word, is what I hold people accountable to. Because it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a plot. There are characters, and it doesn't have a ton of mistakes in it. So we're not setting the bar high. We've set a chair out. Yeah. We've got the bar sitting.
It's sort of like a limbo thing, a limbo stick that's a couple feet up.
So when you read this stuff, it's like, if you want to write porn, write better porn. If you want to write love stories, write love stories. But how these people manage to screw up either a love story or porn, or sometimes both together. I mean, they make fun of the guys who write women that aren't believable. I make fun of the women who write people that aren't on Earth.
There are so many men that are women with penises in the romance genre that it's painful. And, I think I would have sold a lot more books if I was willing to play ball, because I would describe the romance, the indie romance world, like the East Coast, West Coast rappers. There are these hordes of waspy Karen types, and if you aren't in with the right group at the right time and saying what everybody wants you to say and loving what everybody wants you to love and a part of whatever, this kind of like pseudo sorority is doing, it's hard to get the masses behind you. And I've always kind of been like, I'm going to find my own audience, and it's audience of like normal people that aren't extremists about this or that are living normal lives, and I guess maybe that's why there's a realism to what I do, because I feel like the people that appreciate what I write are the people that would want to watch what I want to watch and read what I want to read,
Well, it's been a long trek. If you look at Fury and Rage, those I had a tough time, because those were chick books in like a chick flick type of thing, but there was enough angst in there that I kept reading because it was humorous. But then by the time you did Perpetual Quest for the Perfect Life, that was so vividly cinematic that as you read it, you could see the movie. And
I'll be honest
that's when that pulled me in.
Yeah, and that is truly. That was when I first I had this idea. This was after we'd kind of gone through and sort of we'd kind of revamped the story that we wrote a million years ago, and that was Fury. And Quest was me saying, I have a real idea now in my adult life with my adult mind for a real story. And so that, and again, we now live very close to where I set that story. It was a real place. I want to picture every single person. I like to cast my stories in my mind. I am a very visual person. I was a theater major out of high school. Was very into film. I like to picture, I want it to jump off the page at you like it is a film. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but it is truly how I write. And so I really cast everyone. And so I know every facial expression everyone's making. And whether that translates or not, it's my process. And so, that is, it's a special, and again, it's an ensemble piece. People are like, oh, there's these characters and these characters. And, it's not a traditional romance. It's almost more of like I don't know. I suppose it would probably be thrown into a woman's fiction category or something, because there's too many women involved.
Yeah, but, I mean, you could cliche it, but that book pulled me into where I'm like, I'm going to read anything this girl puts out, because it was. I think by having a Kindle, you don't have to worry about what other people are looking at the cover.
He told me that. He was like, I can read her stuff on the Kindle because then I'm not embarrassed about reading romance novels when I'm out.
Yeah.
out in public.
But again, her books and the books that Les and her wrote are more story oriented, where it's just a good escape. And you're reading about, in the Goodwood trilogy, the guy works. He's got his own furniture thing, and he's creating these awesome bits of furniture, like a good dresser or a table or whatever. And not to make that sound extremely boring, but the relatives. There's a grandmother that's just cut you to the quick and is calling one character just a whore, and bless her heart, that age old Southern compliment that's not a compliment.
Well, we had to represent the Texas time, the dark time. We just moved away, just to lay some background here for Snags. We lived in Texas for 10 years. We were Midwesterners. We moved to Texas. We're there for 10 years, and literally like 2 weeks ago have moved back to the Midwest. So we wanted to write about our Texas experience. And again, the whole thing was not negative. I don't want to paint it that way. And so the Goodwood series, it's called the Carved Heart series, was set in Austin. And again, which is like the Star Spangled Belt Buckle of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so of course there's music and food trucks and, all of the things that make Austin. But we had to represent the Bless Your Hearts and some of the stuff that, really kind of wove its way into our lives being down there. It's nice to be an outsider looking in sometimes and really, look at the I don't know, like what's happening around you and just kind of be
do a little cultural anthropology, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. It was again, like, we met lovely people. We have lifelong friends. We have a lot of connections there still. But
did you ever hear of Ben Snakepit, the comic book artist Ben Snakepit?
I have not.
You're
good. Like, I'm getting all this information from you.
You should look him up. He's an Austin legend, but he was the bass player in a great band called Sword right up until they got famous, and.
Sword's amazing.
Yeah, and he got kind of kicked out of Sword, but he's famous for writing these books, graphic novels. Basically, he does one strip for every day of his life. So He's got a 2009, 2010, 2011, and his life is really interesting. He's this like Austin hipster who's just always getting into all kinds of crazy adventures, but it's all true. Including,
I believe it.
Yeah, those are fun. Those are fun to read. But I was just wondering if you ever met him.
Who was the Paul Giamatti character? The comic book guy. American something.
Yeah, we're supposed to know this, and I'm drawing a blank, and I can't Google it because my phone's occupied right now.
Yeah,
I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah,
he did comic strips with he wrote comic strips, and Robert Crumb illustrated some of them for him.
Right, it's very Bukowski style.
Yeah. We'll remember his name after we stop recording, which will suck.
Yeah. Well, definitely follow up with me because I'm intrigued.
Yeah, Snags, you'll find that you guys have very similar. I mean, you did film for a while, but you did a lot of.
I was going to say something
type stuff.
when you were talking about romance novels, this and that. What I've found in film and in literature is the genre really doesn't matter. Like, just a quick example, I've never been into zombie films, right? But I've made it my mission to check out any series that people have raved about binging. So I've flown through Deadwood and Sopranos and Wired and Breaking Bad and all that. So finally I was like, all right, I don't like zombie films, but I'm gonna check out The Walking Dead. Oh my God, that's like crack cocaine. The genre doesn't matter. It's good writing that matters.
Okay. No.
Yeah.
Okay. So like, two things. A, I'm a junkie for Walking Dead and will watch it until my dying day. Les lost interest at a certain point. We can talk about that later. But
I've heard about that. Yeah, Brett's telling me it's season 8.
We do need to talk about vigilance, Brett.
Vigilance, yes.
Yes. Yeah. So you took that away with about talking about Les's book.
Well, so Les did the Lost one at very, very, fantasy, swords and sorcery, and Vigilance is before Walking Dead, before the one that Brad Pitt did.
I think you were the Z Nation. You were telling me about this. Yeah, he did a zombie book before all this stuff. Yeah.
And Vigilance, what I liked about Vigilance is it's not a point A to point B story. As I recall, it was more like a diary. The narration is almost outside looking in and trying to decipher what has gone on. It was just written in such an original standpoint from just your cliche zombies.
Well, Vigilance was a little weird because it actually happened after the first season of The Walking Dead because they pissed me off so badly. And she'll argue with me, but The Walking Dead is basically one giant snuff film, and I'm not going to say why I'm pissed off, but anybody who watches the first season will know why it's a snuff film. It's basically there's no hope, whatever. Anyway,
the CDC episode.
Yeah, the CDC thing. I got up and walked out of the room.
When they blew up the CDC. Yeah.
There's a lot of lazy writing for sure.
Well, I was like, okay, if I were going to write a zombie book, what would I want it to be? And then I had to, of course, I'm a storyteller and an old school gamer, so I had to come up with the monsters. And the monsters are completely different. The monsters are basically like, what would the human body do if it was infected? Well, the skin would start to harden, so the liquid inside would start to pressurize. And then when they split open, it would just spray this stuff everywhere and spread the virus everywhere. And if it touches you,
spores and whatnot,
you bite and you basically turn. So the whole idea was all of these different people in all these different places would have a different experience. But the more I thought about it, the less I wanted to write about the fall, and the more I wanted to write about what would happen way after the fall. Like the one thing that people wanted was information, and they really craved to know all these things. So they would collect journals. So Vigilance is like a collection of journals held in a library at this town called Sanctuary, where they name the town Vigilance, and they paint on the wall, "Quiet, the dead will hear you," because the dead are attracted to noise. So they live in this whole different world where they have to be quiet, and they develop these high-powered air rifles that'll shoot silently, and they have these protective suits that are multi-layered, that they can pull off if they get stuff on them. And the weird thing was, every chapter, because it was a different journal, I tried to write in a completely different voice, and it made it like it was a whole collection of books. And it was a really weird experience writing it, because it was almost like there was a collection of authors in my head writing these things out.
Yeah, it's very different. And a good 3/4 through, I was like, this is incredible, because that's what I was getting, that it felt like different authors, and just the discipline that would take to not repeat.
Can I lead into a question with a really bad analogy?
Sure.
So, there's back to the music thing. You'll find that Silky and I talk about music a lot. But so the original rhythm guitar player from Guns N' Roses, Izzy Stradlin, quits at the height of their fame because he's disgusted with the whole rock star trip and he's over it. And he retires to a little ranch, and I think he went back to Indiana for a while and then ended up retiring in Ojai in California somewhere. And then he released a string of like 10 brilliant solo albums. Just amazing
underrated.
One of the best discographies any rock musician has ever put out, in my opinion. A lot better than the Guns N' Roses stuff. A lot more similar to the Stones, but it's his voice.
Real Keith Richards.
And reggae and country and rock and roll. And no one gives a damn. Now, I don't feel bad for him because he co-wrote one of the biggest selling albums of all time. I'm sure he's set financially, but he eventually stopped releasing these albums because nobody cared. Does it frustrate?
He only recently, like 2010, released a couple singles that Snags and I jumped on.
Shows how old we are.
Went nowhere.
Shows how old we are. Where you're saying that's recently, but anyways, does that frustrate you guys? Writing stuff we've acknowledged there's a lot of crap out there, but writing stuff that's so brilliant. Having Brett say this kind of stuff about your writing and fellow writers that you do respect, you're putting all this. There are people out there.
You mean old Silky?
No, you're not brilliant. I'm talking to the brilliant people over here. No, I'm just kidding. So,
said the wrong name, dude.
Oh, that's all right. My real name's Craig. His real name's Brett. Sometimes we'll accidentally say those names. We just like the nicknames. Anyways. Does it frustrate you guys writing stuff that's so good and knowing other people are writing stuff that's so good and you put it out there and you guys obviously do a ton of work, have been doing a ton of work on the marketing front. I was actually stunned at the amount of work you were doing on that front. And then it's done. And then, your lives aren't changed. The world isn't reacting to it.
Yeah,
what is that like?
I mean, I went so far as to, I started as an indie author, but I went ahead and was fortunate enough to find an agent and get published with a small publishing house too, in a traditional way. And, again, to just have it not be received, to have no one care. I haven't really written anything other than finishing a small short story since COVID lockdown, because I tried to put out my second, formally traditionally published book right when we were going into lockdown. It was just so exhausting. I mean, we haven't even dived into the amount of social media nonsense you do with this on top of everything else.
Yeah.
And just this constant stream of, if you aren't putting out a new teaser or ad or boosting things on Facebook and Insta and Twitter and all this nonsense, it's that in itself is a part-time job. I was had my daughters doing a Snapchat and TikTok because I absolutely refuse to even have the apps, but they're doing it for me.
Right.
Yeah, I can't. I don't care. I refuse to learn at this
point.
But yeah, no, it's tiresome, and you just think, okay, literally no one cares. This is hours of my life. I mean, I could be learning to play guitar or speak Italian.
Okay,
why am I doing this?
In this we differ, because when we were first doing it, I told her we needed to get to the point where we did everything for our own edification, not from a vanity edification, but write what we want, go where we want, use the book stuff to write off a trip to Boston if you want to go to Boston, or LA if you want to go to LA. And from my standpoint, obviously, I mean, I went back to school to get a degree so that I could make more money and I could have more flexibility in my work so that we would have more money to do that stuff. But it was like the second book in the Lost One series. I have an idea of how those books will end. If I had the money tomorrow where I could just sit around and write, I could probably pop out 5 or 6 books a year.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much.
But then the audience, how do you generate?
Well, I honestly think that, and this may just be me being a crazy old man, but I believe that the genre has to develop, and one of the most enjoyable things that I've experienced lately is audiobooks. And not just any audiobook. Any moron can sit there and go, Jack went up the hill and found the it's bore the hell out of you.
Right.
The people I love are the people that are bringing back the radio drama kind of stories. Even if it's just like, I'm going to read them in different voices. And it's so enjoyable. They bring it to such life, because I always say that Michelle's an author and I'm a storyteller. I can sit you down and tell you a stupid story about something that's ridiculous and dumb, but it's entertaining, and it'll keep you entertained the entire time. And that's how I try and write my books. And part of what comes across when her and I are writing is she'll agonize over something for like 3 hours and, second guess herself and be like, I don't think this is any good. And I'll read it and go, no, it's fine. And then I'll pound on the keyboard like a crazed monkey on crack for like 20 minutes and then hand it back to her and go, I put 4 chapters in, I changed some stuff, see if you like it. Because we do it in different colors so she can see if she wants to keep it or not.
Right.
But she'd be like, where did you even get that from? And I'm like, oh, I just imagined what the characters are saying in my head.
That's brilliant.
But it's like gaming and stuff, like old school, Top Secret, Dungeons and Dragons, whatever, all these different things we did. You had to build that muscle.
Yeah. Right. Improv muscle.
And
the improv muscle,
I think the problem we have right now is that so many people get focused, music, the arts, writing, on the formula. This is the formula that pays. This is the formula that works. This is the movie we're going to make. This is the album we're going to make. And then there's so much noise because 97 monkeys are pounding their heads on a guitar and going, this is music. And you're like,
it's,
that's auto-tune. That hasn't been music since like the mid-70s.
Right. When Snags and I would write, we would get together and we wrote 2 scripts. We worked out 3 brilliant silent films that nobody ever saw, but
they were brilliant. I tell you,
they were violent and they were like absent.
And they were brilliant.
And they were really
and they were brilliant.
These were just showing you how old we are. So the first short films we did were on Super 8, so that's why they were silent.
Yeah,
I love
it. The scripts that we wrote, they took an immense amount of time because we would get together and literally argue whether the character would say the or the or we would get hung up on a word. And both of us maybe younger and you want obviously I want my idea in there
right
versus his idea or and as we've gotten older and we do stuff, it's like speaking for me, I'm like, hey, whatever, let's just make this project. Let's actually do something instead of get caught up at the very beginning on whether they open the door or they're already in the room.
Right. Yeah, you got to keep the bigger perspective in mind.
Do something,
That's super important, though, because one of the best pieces of, I guess, I don't know who said this quote or where it came from, but one of the best things I've ever heard, and I cling to it in more than the writing part of my life, is you can't edit an empty page. So
I love that. I love that.
Shit down. You can come back later and move it around and tweak it. But just start putting it down. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to, have imposter syndrome or get hung up on the details or whatever. But at the end of the day, like, just get the stuff down. It's never been easier to copy and paste and edit and move.
I actually wrote in the early 2000s a full-length script called Lawn Chair Frontier that my dad dated Grace Zabriskie, who's an actress who worked with David Lynch at one point. And Grace,
she was in Twin Peaks.
Yes, character actor.
Oh, wow.
Great.
I love it. I'm a junkie for David Lynch. I'm not going to lie.
You'll know Grace Zabriskie if you look her up.
Anyways,
I'm looking at it now.
Anyways, I mailed her that script. This is mid-90s. And it's eccentric characters in the Southwest just being weirdos, and it's centered around a diner and a sex toy shop. And so I
already want to see it.
Yeah, I got to find it. I've got to find it. But I mailed it to her, and she read it and she said, if you edit this, I'll show it around to people. And I said, that's awesome. What do you want me to do? And she goes, I don't know. I just think you need to revise it some more. And I was like, that's great. What, like how? What would you change about it? I don't really know. I just think maybe it needs another draft. I didn't know what the hell to do. And I just never did anything because I was like, I thought it was good as it was. I was kind of
and you can't stop on what one person says, no matter.
I
who
know,
they
but
are.
it's just about the editing discussion.
Solid, then
I thought it was as good as it was. So what was I gonna do? Spend all that time writing another draft, and it wasn't what she wanted. You know what I mean? So that was it. I mean, I never did anything. I didn't.
You literally could have removed 2 words,
resent
it, and she very well might have said, "Brilliant." That's what I'm. You know what I mean?
So
I should have called you about that.
Can I just say I'm so aghast and starstruck because she's amazing. Like, legendary.
She is.
Yeah.
I did. I'm on LinkedIn with her, and I did send her a little private message about the Sink or Swim script that we through our pseudonym author published on Amazon, and never heard back from her on that.
There are 2 things that I will say to people who run into the situation that you have. The first one is, go find some bitchy author friends that you can trust, or some beta readers that you can trust even better, and have them read it, and try and find people that are from completely different backgrounds, because they'll read it and they'll all give you different feedback.
Right. Oh, that's a good idea.
Or
Absolutely.
just drawer like Stephen King and come back a year later.
Right.
Right.
Because if you cleanse your own palate, you'll forget you wrote it.
Yeah.
You'll be like, this person's a genius. Oh, wait.
Or this person's a moron. And I've done both.
Right.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is, there's nothing better than having some trusted, frank beta readers to tell you if they think you're on the right track, if they think you're not, if they feel like you're in the wrong place, just a test audience of your own. So, but it's hard to find the right people, and sometimes you have to change them out. And so finding that group is hard.
You definitely need somebody that's going to take a second and say, hey, you're info dumping. The first 4 chapters are just a tirade of info.
Exposition.
That I'm not gonna remember.
Yeah.
Nor do you care about, nor does it propel the story forward.
Right.
You need those friends that are not afraid to be frank. I always say that a lot of these authors out there that have, again, published 80,000 words of stuff they never should have, don't have good friends, don't have real friends.
Right.
They have a bunch of people, they have a bunch of yes men, and you don't need that.
Right.
I don't need, and it's like it's like being Dr. House. Like, you need people to tell you everything's lupus, and then you are like, okay, it's not lupus, but now you've all made me think of another idea of what this diagnosis should be.
Right.
So sometimes they would say things to me, and it wouldn't necessarily fix what I was trying to do, but it would spark other ideas in my mind, and then I would take it and run in another direction because of the feedback they gave me. So it's not always that you'll take them literally, but you just need that kind of little pool of people to be, at least I did, because I'm a very extroverted writer. A lot of people are very introverted that are authors, but I'm very much an extrovert. And so I needed almost like a live audience in real time to be reacting to me because of that theater background, because I'm like wanting that kind of live feedback experience where the energy is coming off the crowd, so whether what you're doing makes a difference or is working or not working. And for me, that really worked well. So I think it just depends on the personality type too. Like, where do you get your energy? Is it from an external force or internal? And knowing those things about yourself and figuring those things out, trying different things.
Right.
Get that feedback.
I know specific feedback would have been nice, other than just, I don't know, just rewrite it. Okay.
Yeah. What do you do?
Yeah, that's not helpful whatsoever. I mean, but as an actress or somebody that's performing art, they're just telling you something isn't working for them, but they can't put their finger on it.
She couldn't articulate it. Yeah.
Yeah, true. On Snags' question, where he was saying, you put all this effort in and you put it out there and you hear 3 people clapping.
That's the story of our life, dude. All of our creative endeavors. We got six plays on episode 1 of the podcast.
Michelle wrote this book called True North that, to me, the opening prologue was very reminiscent of D.B. Cooper. And I was immediately like, oh my God, this is going to be phenomenal. I have to
interrupt because I'm getting a notification on the podcast app that we have 4 minutes left. Okay. 60 minutes is the max. I do want to get their contact info in so people know where to find their work, but go ahead and finish your thing real quick.
I was just going to say, she wrote this amazing book, and I personally, it's still one of my favorites, and I read all the time. And I thought this should be the book that, jumpstarts their writing career. And, what do you do?
Yeah. And I mean, it did become in the top 10 of overall Amazon for 5 seconds.
Nice.
One night.
That's awesome.
When I was on sale for 99 cents, I was up there with I think I have screenshots where, multiple authors were major authors were under me on the top 10, but they were selling their books for $14 and mine was 99 cents,
Our script is number 1069 in dark humor comedy.
Love it. Boom.
We're on 1068's heels.
Oh yeah, we got them on the run. Hey, I do want to let everybody know, if people want to find out about you, all your work and everything, is there a website they can go to get all the information?
Truly, the best place to go if they really want to see, you can go to Amazon and look up L.G. Pace 3 or Michelle Pace. We both have author presence on Amazon, and you can see, again, everything that we've published.
Is Pace P-A-I-C-E? Spell Pace for me.
P-A-C-E.
P-A-C-E.
Yeah.
Pick up the Pace at your local bookstore.
All right, Michelle Pace and
L.G. Pace 3.
L.G. Pace 3. Okay. Well, we've got 2.5 minutes. So,
Les, can you tell that Mountain Dew story in 2.5 minutes?
Sure, let's give it a shot. So, there was a dark time when I was homeless that I went back to my hometown and was hanging out with some younger kids. They were a couple years behind me in school, and one of them had a job where he had a new little car, and we'd all drive around in this thing. And I was kind of in a bad place and kind of an asshole anyway. But we're driving down the road, and he has 2 bottles. He has a bottle of Mountain Dew between his legs, and he has a bottle in the center console, and he's spitting chaw into it, which I find disgusting. So I wait until
2 minutes
halfway to where we're going, and he puts his bottle of pop in one of the cup holders and his bottle of chaw is in the other. And I quietly, because it's dark out, we're driving down a dark gravel road, I quietly reach over and switch those 2 bottles around without anybody noticing. So we're barreling down the road. They're jamming out to some friggin' crappy hair band that's, the 3rd generation hair bands, not even Poison.
We'll say Bullet Boys. Go ahead.
1.5 minutes.
He grabs the bottle, he pulls the cap off, he takes a giant swig, and about halfway through that swig, he realizes he just was downing his bottle of chaw. So he slams on the brakes, he spews all over the inside of the car, all over the inside of the windshield. We, go sideways on the road, almost go into the ditch. The smell gets all over the guys in the back seat. I, of course, was in the shotgun. I just jumped out of the car. And so this brand new car just has chaw spit all over it. He's like,
60 seconds.
Happened? What? And somebody's like, let's switch the bottles on you. Watch the.
Oh, man. Ratted you out.
I'm like, yeah, I did. That's a really fucking nasty habit you have. I'm like, I'm going to walk. So I took off into the darkness, walked away. They were like, get back here up and clean up the car. I'm like, I got to do shit, but stay white.
That is the best drop the mic story I've ever heard to phenomenal. Wrap up a podcast right there.
Lester Pace, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh.
It's
consider a career in stand-up comedy if the writing thing doesn't work out. That was awesome.
Well, we can do a pace part 2.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
We can guest star sometimes if you just want to rave on about random topics. We're happy to just pop in.
We will definitely do that. We've got 5 seconds left, so I'm going to end it.
All right.
Thank you guys very much. This is awesome.